If this is your first time working with an Illustrator, or if the first time didn't go as planned, be sure to watch this video. I will give you the top 8 do's and don'ts to help you facilitate a successful collaboration between you, the author, and your children's book illustrator. Hi there, I'm Eevi, an award-winning children's author and ghostwriter over on eevijones.com and the creator of Children's Book University. I started writing children's books back in 2013, and over the years I have commissioned and worked with tons of very talented illustrators, either for my own projects as well as for my ghostwriting clients. And every time I commissioned a new artist, I used this opportunity to experiment with the workflow and level of interactions between me and the illustrators. Sometimes I work on 5 books simultaneously, so I know that you too will greatly benefit from these top 8 do's and don'ts. Following these guidelines will make this experience with your commissioned artist an amazing one. So let's jump right in. The number 1 guideline is this: work all of the logistical stuff out beforehand. Now, I actually made a separate video on this in my Finding an Illustrator video, and I'll be sure to link to it below. In that video, I talk about creating what I call an Illustrator package that will include all the information you will need to share with your illustrator in order to begin the illustration process. So I'll be sure to link to that below. So getting organized beforehand is definitely the number 1 thing to do if you wish to successfully work with your illustrator, because working out all the logistical stuff beforehand will free up your mind so you can fully concentrate on the actual illustration process. And again, I will make sure to link to the Finding an Illustrator video below. The second big do is this: be and stay organized. That's something I teach my students in Children's Book University very early on, from the folder setup on your computer all the way to how you name your individual files. An intentional naming method and staying organized will be instrumental when it comes to stress prevention. So every time I start a new project, I create a separate folder, and within that folder I create more folders, one for each stage of my book as well as for each format or version of my book. So for example, I have a folder for all my hardcover files, a folder for all my paperback files, and a folder for all the original illustrations, a folder for all the sketches, and so on. So be sure to label each of these files clearly so you know right away what each is meant for and what each holds. The third big do goes hand in hand with what I just mentioned. If you want to stay organized, always assume you are not your illustrator's only client, because chances are you aren't, right? And in honoring this thought, you can do 2 things. The first thing is that when you are naming your files, be sure you let your own name be part of that. So for example, I usually name my files with parts of the book title, the purpose, and my name. So for example, if the file is my illustrator brief for my book, My Money Bunnies, then I would name my file something like this: Eevi-bunnies-illustrator brief. So that way it includes my name, it includes what it is, and it includes the book project. I make sure to follow the same naming style for all my folders. That way, if the illustrator has a ton of other files from other clients, all my files will show up together under E for Eevi. So I'm trying to make it super easy for the illustrator to stay organized as well. The second thing here is to be sensible with your expectations as to when you should have heard back from your illustrator, right? Again, always assume you are not your illustrator's only client. It may take him or her a day or 2 to get back to you. As long as you both are working within your set time frame, you should be good to go. If you do feel he or she may be getting behind, a gentle yet respectful nudge or reminder will generally do. The fourth big do is really important when it comes to working with an illustrator, and that's to be clear about what you want. If you have a specific vision for your book in mind, be sure to let your illustrator know. I generally provide my illustrator with a very detailed illustrator brief, like the one I offer in my Illustrator Survival Kit. And I'll be sure to link to that below as well. This brief addresses things such as deadline, requested size for your illustrations, whether or not you want them with bleed or without bleed, character descriptions and examples, visual examples, descriptions of each scene, cover design ideas, and title page ideas, things like that. Now, if you don't know the size of your children's book yet, I highly recommend you figure this out beforehand as well. If you need help with this, I have created a separate video on that as well, and I'll link to it below. But please do yourself a favor and know the trim size, because without it, you don't even know the size you want your illustrator to create your illustrations in, right? Which is absolutely crucial. The fifth big do when it comes to successfully working with your illustrator is to provide feedback on your illustrator's work in a clear and concise manner. The more to the point your feedback, the more effective it will be. For this, I suggest you create something similar to what I call an illustrator feedback form. I generally create two separate kinds. The first one is the storyboard feedback. This one I specifically create after I get the first round of sketches back, letting the illustrator know if those sketches are heading in the right direction. And the second one is an illustrator feedback. This one is for providing feedback on the colored or almost finished illustrations. Using these forms allows me to stay organized, capturing my feedback on all illustrations in one single document. That little tweak to my workflow helps so much, as I no longer have to go on an email hunt within my inbox, right? Trying to find the illustrations that require editing. These forms are also in the Illustrator Survival Kit that I mentioned earlier, but you can easily create these forms yourself by simply using Google Docs. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Anything that helps you stay organized with all the illustrations will do. Guideline number 6 is one of the biggest I could ever share with you to help you with your illustrator. And it's this: see your relationship with your illustrator as a partnership. Your book will be so much better if both of you and your illustrator, are invested in it, right? A talented illustrator knows his or her craft, right? So let them infuse your ideas with their know-how and creativity. The more you let your illustrator be part of this incredible journey of yours, the more he or she will be invested in your book's success. Remember too that each illustrator has his or her own style that they have honed, refined, and perfected over years, right? So the style you saw in their portfolio is most likely the style you will get. So it's important to work within their style range. So for example, if an illustrator works in watercolor, you should expect to have your work done in watercolor. It wouldn't be fair to the illustrator to expect him or her to completely change their style and now use a completely different style. And that goes hand in hand with tip number 7, be open. Now, what I mean with be open is to try to take a cue from your illustrator, right? How does he or she prefer to work? Based on that knowledge, what can you do to improve the workflow? So for example, some illustrators love to create all sketches first before diving into the coloring process, while others prefer to break up the sketching and storyboard creation by sketching and coloring one illustration at a time. Knowing this, try to be accommodating if at all possible. Try to incorporate their process or their way of doing things as well. And the very last but very big tip I'll share with you is this: stand up for yourself and your book. While you do want to incorporate your illustrator's suggestions and be sensitive to their needs, don't be afraid to speak up and ask for changes if you feel like your needs haven't been addressed or met. It is, after all, your children's book, right? And that's what you have been working on so very hard. But always remember, be respectful, be kind, and remember that even though you may have never met this person in person, he or she is a real human being. I have written and ghostwritten over 50 books, and I follow these guidelines to a T, so I know they will work for you as well. I'm often asked how to work with an illustrator, so it is my hope that these outlined guidelines above will facilitate the beginning of a fantastic work relationship between yourself and your illustrator. There's a reason why many outsourcing sites allow the illustrator to rate their employer as well, not just the other way around. Just like as authors, illustrators want to know they're protected and feel that their art and their creations are being respected and valued. By following these suggested guidelines on how to work with an illustrator, you'll ensure that you, as a children's book author, show proper etiquette that will make illustrators will want to work with you again and again. In the end, it helps to remember that it isn't just you that gets to decide whether or not you'll work with an illustrator, right? Instead, remember that illustrators don't have to accept your project. They choose to. It is always a two-sided exchange. I hope you found this really helpful and answered all your questions you may have had regarding how to successfully work with an illustrator. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't yet. Here is to an amazing partnership between you and your illustrator, my sweet friend. Bye.